Good evening. In our news bulletin for this evening, the Niue Assembly is due to meet to elect the Speaker of the Assembly and Premier next week. The Chief Trade Advisor for the Pacific is on the island to discuss PACER Plus developments. Local farmers have shown concerns regarding a shortage of weed killer on the island. Kilikiki teams will seize the moment during the long Easter break to play a few games. The final arrangements and paperwork is being collated to prepare for the affirmation of the 15th Niue Assembly next week. All 20 members of the Niue Assembly have been confirmed, and political lobbying for some of the key positions in the Assembly are well underway. According to the clerk to the Assembly, the first meeting will be conducted by the Speaker of the House, Auhiva Levy. At this meeting, members will be sworn in by taking their oath of allegiance before moving on to electing a Speaker. If two or more names are presented, a secret vote must be taken. Once the Speaker has been elected, he or she may accept the appointment before continuing on with proceedings for the Niue Assembly to elect the Premier. At the moment, there are two names that have been put forward, Stanley Kaloni and Toke Tālangi. Members of the Assembly will vote by secret vote for the Premier. Whoever receives the most votes will lead the country for the next 3 years. However, the appointment of ministers will happen after the meeting at the discretion of the Premier, who will elect or nominate 3 other members of the Assembly to form his cabinet. These names must be presented to the Speaker within 7 days of electing the Premier, and the meeting of the 15th Niue Assembly will be held next week on Wednesday, the 23rd of April. The Chief Trade Advisor of the Pacific Island countries is on the island this week for further discussions relating to the PACER Plus agreement during Niue's national consultations this week with stakeholders. PACER Plus is a proposed trade, development and economic cooperation agreement currently being negotiated by 13 Pacific Forum Island countries with Australia and New Zealand. At the 2010 Forum Trade Ministers meeting, it was then that ministers recognized the capacity constraints that faced many Forum Island countries when undertaking these types of negotiations. And despite the fluctuations in exports and imports or limited trade that Niue is involved in, there is still potential for growth.
Niue, I think, has a lot of potential in terms of tourism, and PACER Plus is not an agreement only covering trade in goods, but as well trade in services and investment. And for a country like Niue, I think 2 sectors of importance would be trade in services as well as investment. I think you have it's a beautiful country, a lot of things to do, but obviously I think there is lack of capital investment. So PACER Plus can help Niue in that regard, help Niue to attract the necessary investment into the critical sectors of the economy, which would then create jobs and lift the standards of living of the people of Niue. Last year, at the meeting in Auckland, the Pacific ministers gave us the deadline to try to agree on the legal text by December of this year and work on the schedules of commitments next year. So I think we are on track with a little bit of flexibility on all sides. I think we should be able to conclude the negotiations on the legal text by the end of this year. But there are 2 important issues where I think we need to have movement, and these are labor mobility and development assistance. So for most of the Pacific Island countries, if Australia and New Zealand are to give substantive commitments in these 2 areas, then I think it should be possible for us to wrap up the negotiations as soon as possible.
This is the Chief Trade Advisor's first trip to Niue, and he says it has been a very opening experience, with stakeholders continuing to question the benefits of signing on to such agreements, with some challenges, but overall he says that he is satisfied with the progress that has been made.
I'm very satisfied with the negotiations, the consultations I've had. I think Niue is a very open country anyway, and I think for the stakeholders that I've met, they wanted to see how. So there isn't any sense of protectionism. I think Niue is a very open country, and insofar as PACER Plus can help the country to attract the necessary investment, I think it will be received positively by the population at large. But as I said, I'm very satisfied with the consultations in terms of the openness and the eagerness to engage.
Dr. Casey says, above all, it is the hope that PACER Plus will serve as an agreement that will strengthen the regional economy. A shortage of weed killer on the island has some growers voicing their frustrations. The recent downpours has seen a growth spur of weeds on the island, and farmers say that the island has run out of gramoxone. They need to control weeds on their plantations. According to agriculture sources, there were previously 3 businesses that supplied gramoxone on the island, or normally bring in weed killer that farmers rely on, but it seems at the moment there is only one business that continues to order in weed killer. Another explanation, they said, could be that the corrosiveness and danger of such chemicals means that they can only bring in limited supplies, especially if they're in containers with other goods. Although there was a considerable amount of weed killer imported on the last shipment, the issue could be that some people bought the supply in bulk, leaving little or none left for others to purchase. A handful of growers were suggesting that to avoid such incidents, perhaps the Agriculture Department could step in. DEF Director Brendan Pasisi said that due to government policies promoting private sector development, the department no longer has the agriculture store and only orders in specific chemicals that they require for their work. This does not include gramoxone. However, he said if there is a major concern, the department may look at discussing with those in the private sector to resolve the issue and find alternative ways to ensure that the agriculture sector is not adversely affected. With the long Easter weekend ahead, Kilikiki teams are taking the opportunity to make some headway with some of their games postponed a few weeks ago. Easter Monday will see La Kappa facing their neighbours Liku on the pitch in Vaea. Hakupu will be taking on Alofi on the field in Tamkotonga, and Avasalia set to play Tamkotonga in Hakupu. Tuapa team will be tied up with their village bringing by. That means Mutalau is on bye. Moving on to more games after the Anzac public holiday on Friday, teams will also face off on Saturday next week, with Tamkotonga and Vaea setting the pace for their last game. Mutalau will play Hikutoi team. Avaseli will meet their match with Tuapa, and Makefu will challenge La Kappa. That leaves one more game between Tuapa and Mutalau before determining who will make it into the finals that has now been scheduled for the 10th of May if all goes well. And those are our news stories for tonight. However, we do hope that you have a happy, long Easter weekend to all on the island and those who will be enjoying a game of cricket or whatever activities you may participate in.